Good. Okay, let me shrink these guys and here. Come on. Okay. All right. Emotion. If I ask you, it's
You
supposed,
cannot see it. Sorry.
oh no, it's supposed to be a blue.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there'll be a cold front coming from the west, right? That's like a blue screen. That was a very bad joke. Okay. Um, if I ask you what an emotion is, what is emotion? Anybody have a sense? I want to see you guys' faces. And I don't, but I could. And there you go. Sorry. I'm going to go back here and go back. What? Oh, see, I didn't want that. What's an emotion? What's emotion? If anybody can just yell out an answer, it's not. Somebody says,
Feeling.
something's an emotion. How would you define emotion?
Moving, going somewhere.
No, not motion, emotion.
It's a feeling.
Yeah, you said motion. Yeah, I know. No.
It's how you feel inside
It's how you feel inside, feeling, and
based on something.
based on something. Okay. So my guess is if you ask 100 people what emotion is, an emotion is, that 99 of them basically will say feeling. And I think there's a reason why we jump to feeling automatically. It's because you feel feelings, right? I think that's why people try to explain things on environment so much, experience, because you experience experiences. People don't think about other crap that goes on. But yeah, but here's emotion. And again, perfectly right, but there are other components to emotion. So, well, first of all, emotion is motivational, right? If you have certain emotions, they motivate you to do certain things, right? As opposed maybe to other things. Now, affect, that's feelings. Has anybody here ever used, I'm moving that, so I lost your faces for a minute again. Does anybody know, has anybody heard the term affect? Like somebody positive affect? Have you ever heard that? It's not common, so don't think weird if you don't. Has anybody heard that? Like negative affect or positive affect? Sounds like no. Well, in psychology, affect is really feeling. So when people talk about emotion, they'll use the word affect. And as you can see, it's the same word as affect, right? So did this affect the other thing? That's an A. And remember the outcome. If you affect something, AFFECT, then you had an effect, EFFECT, right? That's how they differ, right? One is a noun, EFFECT. One is the verb, AFFECT. In this case, AFFECT has nothing to do with that. It's just a term they use for emotion, particularly feeling, right? So if anybody asks you on the train what affect is in psychology, you can answer it. But also physiology, right? We have physiological responses that are part of emotion. So if you're frightened, certain things happen to your body that, are consistent with that. Your heart rate might increase, right? You might sweat, all this kind of stuff that we don't necessarily immediately connect, but it's part of it. Also, the way you think and the way you perceive. If you're frightened, you're probably not going to think about, that was a cute dress I saw the other day. I'm wondering if they still sell it. That's not what you think when you're really scared of something, right? You focus on the source of the threat, right? So the way you think and what you perceive changes. If you think somebody's following you, your hearing gets really good. There might be other people, but you hear it. You notice that person really well. So it focuses you. And even your behavior or your tendencies will happen. Like you'll act differently or your body will get ready to do something, right? They call it fight or flight. right? You're getting ready to fight or flee. So in addition to the feelings you have all these other things that go around. So you can tell that it's sort of a motivational thing, right? It's almost readying your body to do certain things. So that's emotion, right? And I'm going to do this again because I had to get rid of it and it's supposed to, no, it's screwing up. Yesterday I could see your faces and see this at the same time. It wants to make a choice. Okay, let's see. Now there are different perspectives on this. Now your book talks about two of them. We won't go heavy into this, the difference between them. But there's something called discrete emotions theory, and I'm not even going to ask you about that. But what it basically does is it says that emotions are, this is Paul Ekman. You don't have to know that name, at least not for this. Says emotions are the products of evolution, meaning, humans have certain emotions like fear, anger, contempt, whatever. All around the world, they have the same ones, and they serve the function in some way. That's the argument. They're biologically programmed, they're part of our biology. They're accompanied by distinct facial and bodily reactions. So when you're sad, your face does something. When you're happy, it does something. When you're frightened, it does something. When you're disgusted, it does something. Right?
Sorry, are we supposed to be looking at the slides? Because I can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why it wasn't. I'm sorry. If you ever notice that, just yell out early. I know it feels funny to do that, but it's because I switched screens and then I didn't reset. Sorry. But thanks for telling me. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna try it again. Let's see if that'll work. Okay, and do you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. That's why I wasn't getting this certain screen. Okay, I failed. I deserve 10 points off. They're going to take 10 points off on my application to heaven. At least 10. I go to 20 or 30. I don't know. For past misdeeds. Oh man, I'm already climbing out a hole. All right, we move on, people. So here, yeah. So this is what you were supposed to be seeing. Emotion, right? All these fun words, all that stuff I talked about, right? So you have tendencies like actions or action tendencies. You have cognitions or perceptions. You just think differently, act differently, right? Is this working? Sorry. Okay, so that was that. And I said theoretical perspectives. There's something called discrete emotions theory. Doesn't matter. It's the only theory I'm going to talk about here. It's that emotions are products of evolution. Now, who made that argument a million years ago in 1872 in the book, The Expression of Emotion in Man and Animals by Charles Darwin? That, they're there because they serve some kind of a function, an adaptive function. Accompanied by distinct facial and bodily reactions. So again, the disgust expression is different than the fear expression. And if you look at people's faces and you look at their musculature, you can see that certain muscles are used in certain situations, for certain emotions and not for other emotions, and different ones for other emotions. And they're pretty universal, those facial expressions. And then they appear, I said apparent, they appear early in life. Sorry. They appear or are differentiated early in life. By the end of the first year, the basic emotions and the basic facial expressions of emotion are there, right? So all those what are called basic emotions come online. So here are some of them. I'm trying to move these faces a little because they aren't getting in the way. All right, okay. Oh, sorry. It's so, okay, I'm going back. Your faces were in the way. Okay. So here they are, and you'll see, is that blocked for you? It's blocked for me. There. Okay. Oh, I want to let you guys go. Okay. Trying to move your faces out of the way. It won't let me. Okay. So here's the nature of what called basic emotions, and sometimes called primary emotions. They talk about this in the textbook. They're universal. They're recognized throughout the world. So if somebody in America is, angry, and you show that their face to somebody in the Philippines or to somebody in a culture that have not seen anyone outside of where they are in the world, they'll be able to tell what expression the person in America is showing, and vice versa, because we wear it on our faces and we're all human. So they appear early in development, first year. It's a little redundant with the last one, and accompanied by distinct facial and bodily reactions. So these basic are primary. So one of them is fear, that's been identified, right? It's a basic emotion. Anger, sadness, joy, one might say happiness, but strong happiness, surprise, and disgust. These were 6 that were identified, and I think Ekman, who's like the big emotion researcher, he was able to identify a 7th, maybe even an 8th. I don't keep up with that anymore. And one was contempt, and it's not content. That's a big smile and a full belly and whatever, that's content. This is contempt, meaning like, you just kind of disgusted by someone, like you just have total contempt for them. But let's just go with these. So these are basic emotions. Now, Charles Darwin, had thought that facial expressions were innate. He thought humans had them because they were human, right? That all humans have certain emotions. Now, has anybody ever heard of Margaret Mead? You ever hear that name, anybody? Being no one's answering, I assume no. Okay. Margaret Mead was a cultural anthropologist, and she looked at certain, cultures, and she's known for, why am I forgetting where she looked? Whatever. Oh, somebody is coming in. All right. Where are they? Oh, I left, coming in. Okay. She thought they were learned. Now, this is something that's interesting in a sense, well, what did Margaret Mead study? She's a cultural anthropologist. So what do you think she studied? She studied cultures, differences between cultures. Often what you focus on affects how you see things. So she focused on cultural differences. So she's going to think that they're going to be differences and they're going to be driven by culture more than somebody who doesn't take that perspective. No one's saying she's wrong, but that's going to, bias how she sees it. Paul Ekman or Darwin, before that, thought they were just, you're human. That's why you have them. So if Margaret Mead was right that they were learned independently in different cultures, different emotions, it's the way you're raised, right? Whether you have this or that. How do we figure out who was right? Yeah, how would you figure out if Margaret Mead is right that they're different cultures, they have different emotions, and they're learned separately in different emotions, whereas Darwin thinks they're innate and everyone's going to have the same ones? How would you figure out if Darwin or Mead are correct?
Well, you live amongst those cultures.
Okay, so you live amongst the culture, and then how would you be able to tell if they're learned there or
I mean, that would be through experiment.
Okay.
Had a act, if you had a, I don't know what the right word is, an algorithm or something that you are testing, like to decipher which one is more happier or whatever. I don't know.
Okay, well, that would tell you if they're happy or whatever, but why they have, do we have the same emotions or are they different across cultures, right? So what they did was one way to do it, which would be very expensive and take forever and would never be solved, is you'd have to live amongst the people and look at every different culture in the world to see if they're different. What they did is, this is Paul Ekman, what he did is he had a shortcut on that. He said, if they're learned, right, then people should maybe have different emotions in different places if they're learned separately. But if we find that people who had no interaction between them in different parts of the world, if they express the same emotions and the same facial expressions of emotions, then it has to be that there's something about being human that has to do with those emotions. Because even if somebody says they teach them that in their culture, then somebody would have to turn around and go, then how come all the cultures teach the same thing? Right? You have to explain that. Right? So if you have common socialization around the world, then socialization is not an explanation, it's something to be explained. Right? It's like cultural similarities. There are cultural differences, but where you see the cultural similarities, that tends to, suggest that there's something about being human that led to those cultures. Because think about it. What came first, humans or culture? Humans. Right? So cultures will be different, but they'll be influenced heavily by human traits. Right? So what they did was what Ekman did, Paul Ekman, I'm clicking because it doesn't want me to move. So so before I go on to what he did, here are the basic emotions. Look at these facial expressions of emotion. Do those look right? Anger,
Yeah.
disgust, fear, joy, sadness. That's extreme sadness there. Surprise. Okay. So those are different, we wear those on our faces, and those are our basic emotions that in children are expressed during the first year of life. So what did Paul Ekman do? And Wally Friesen, his co-author. Well, he went to New Guinea. Where's New Guinea? Anybody? Where's that?
Not say he went to Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, he went to Papua New Guinea. Where is that?
Africa, I guess.
It's in West Africa.
No, there's Guinea in West Africa and different Guineas, but New Guinea is in where? Anybody? It's in the South Pacific. Right? Remember? Well, can I show a map? It's just interesting because a lot of people think it's in Africa because there are Guineas in Africa, right? There's Equatorial Guinea. So let me search. I don't want to play with it, but whatever, because then we'll get screwed up with screens again. But yeah, it's like a large area. It's kind of near Australia. If you've ever seen it, it's a large thing in it. And he went there and he looked at a group called the Four of New Guinea. And that's interesting too, because sometimes when people see the natives of New Guinea, like the Four, they think they're from Africa because of certain facial physiognomy and hair and stuff like that. But that has to do with migration from Africa, right? There are different routes that have been taken, and there are similarities in facial physiognomy and stuff sometimes in the Pacific that, are different than other parts of Asia or whatever, but that nobody cares. Okay. So he looked at people from New Guinea, tribes, these were tribesmen, and they weren't women, and US college students, I think they were all men too, right? Research has come a long way in including, women. um, so he showed them pictures of the other group. So he showed the kids at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, pictures of the four, and vice versa. He showed the Americans pictures of the four. And they were displaying different facial expressions, either happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, disgust, or fear.
Professor, is there supposed to be something on the screen at this point?
Oh, did I get rid of? Sorry, God, I must have changed something. And okay, yes.
Again,
So it's popping
that's
in.
10.1.
Let me move this so I can go back to my other thing and show it. Okay, sorry guys. Okay, you see it now, right? Do you see it?
The
Yeah.
slide.
Okay, sorry. So this is what I showed you. I said, how did he test it? And those are the basic emotions. So he looked at people from New Guinea. The name of the tribe was the Four. And he showed pictures of these people to kids, college students at University of California, Berkeley. And he showed pictures of the students at University of California, Berkeley to the Four. And what he basically said to them is, as indicate which expression matched the given emotion. So of course he's not speaking English to the Four; they have their own language. And for example, he would say like his or her mother just died, and he's very sad. Point to the face that looks like that, he would say to the people in New Guinea. And then he would ask the kids at Berkeley, point to the face of the person who's sad in New Guinea, right? And they were they were accurate, right? Not perfectly, but way beyond chance. They were accurate in being able to point, even though they're from very different parts of the world. So here's some stimuli. So here are people from New Guinea, from the Four tribe. So you would see them like in here, they had to select anger. These are the kids in the US. They had to select anger, sadness, disgust, or happiness. What is this, right? And you guys might be good at this. And women are often better than men at this, by the way. But I wonder how everyone, let's do it together. I'm going to get it wrong. So, oh, sorry. So what about this first gentleman who I think is might be the same as second, and the third and fourth is the same gentleman. Okay, so what do we think that first guy, what do you think his emotion is?
He looks happy.
Happy.
Happy?
Yeah, I think he's happy. So happiness. He seems content, happy. Okay, what about the second?
Disgust.
You think?
He looks sad.
Oh,
I think he looks sad.
He does.
Does he?
He do to me.
Yeah, he's sad.
I think he's sad. He looks sad. Yeah.
He's in mourning.
He needs 10 points on his exam. Okay. Okay, what about this cat here, the third person?
Anger.
Angry.
Angry. He looks like he's seething with anger. Okay. And see, I didn't even see that, man. He could be angry at me and I go, oh, he seems fine. I'm bad with shit like this. And I'm like, oh, okay. What about the last guy? What's he doing?
Disgust.
I think it's disgust. Yeah, he's sort of closing his mouth and squinting at his nose, like he's trying to block the funk from entering his head, right? It's kind of what disgust is, right? You're kind of, you smell something nasty and you're like, ah. Okay, so they were, they did fairly well on this. And then people in that tribe, these people and more, when they saw pictures of the American kids, they were accurate as well in saying what expressions they were showing. right? And they would say, let's say people from different parts of the world have slightly different, they call it facial physiognomy, slightly different features, and whatever. Of course, we know that. It's not about that. It's about the muscles, right? It's about the muscles being used. That's how we can tell what expression someone's showing, what muscles are being used, right? So you have something called there's something called the Duchenne smile. That's a real smile, right? He was an anatomist, right? Duchenne. Have you ever heard like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy? Comes from that. Okay. Now, what a Duchenne smile is a real smile, and then there's a fake smile. Anybody know what a fake smile is? It's the smile you give me when you go, "Hi, professor." I know.
Like this.
Okay, you're doing it. Yeah. So what are you not doing so you're smiling kind of?
Yeah, with your mouth closed.
Okay, you're smiling with your mouth
And
closed.
smirking at the same time.
You're smiling, smirking at the same time. All right. It's good. They both are right? So now what they show, even when you're using your mouth when you smile, a real smile, you don't just use your mouth. What do you use?
Your eyes.
Your eyes.
See?
Yes, your eyes. Your eyes are part of it as well. So you have like a grimace in your eyes, right? So you're not just using your zygomatic muscles around your mouth. You're using your orbicularis oculi muscles around your eyes. So you see like a little, that's why they say as you get older, you smile a lot. You got those little lines, right? If you don't have them yet, you'll have them. I got tons of them. Crow's feet, thank you. My crow's got plenty of feet. Yep. They need they're like millipedes, man. They need a whole closet full of shoes. I got so many feet. So yeah, they're up here. So yeah, so if somebody's smiling like a ultra smile, they go like, right? Maybe it's a little quicker too. Sometimes they go, but a real smile is smile and then the eyes. I smile only with my eyes half the time. And people always say to me, "You're not smiling in a photo," but I am with my eyes. Don't ask me why. I have a lot of issues, people. A lot of issues. Okay. So, all right, that was fun. Maybe, but that's the study. So, what he found was that, and the reason that this is a good comparison group to use, people in the US and people in New Guinea, is because they never the people in New Guinea, this tribe, they had never at that point, this is like the late 60s, early 70s, they had never interacted with anybody outside their group. Right? So if they showed the same expressions and recognized the expressions of the Americans, right? And the Americans saw their expressions and recognized them, how would that happen? That they couldn't have learned them. How could they learn them from the other culture? They never saw the other culture. So Ekman figured that if they showed those same emotions and recognized those same emotions, the same expressions, that it must have something to do with being human. That we all have those emotions. It's part of being human. It's like having two legs. Does that make sense? Now, let me ask you, why didn't Ekman, if he was looking for universals to see if these basic emotions were universal to humans everywhere, why didn't he look at people in America and people in Japan? Why didn't he use Japanese people as his comparison group? Why did he use New Guinea? Why did he use these four, this tribe in New Guinea, and not Japanese people? Anybody?
Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, I forgot. No. Why did Ekman use as, the group to look at the 4 of New Guinea rather than Japanese people? Why didn't he just go to Japan and look at those people and see if they could recognize the Americans' facial expressions and the Americans could recognize theirs? Why did he have to go to New Guinea?
I think since they don't have no other interaction with other cultures, so he wanted to like prove like what he his point.
Yeah, he wanted to, if he wanted to show they weren't learned, right? They didn't learn them from the other people, right? He couldn't go to Japan. Japan have seen people in the West, right? People in the West have seen Japanese people. They've seen Japanese movies. They've seen, right? But if he looked at people in New Guinea who never saw anybody outside of New Guinea and they showed the same expressions as people in the West, then there must be something innate about it. That makes sense? Who kind of understands that?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay.
But who else would they mimic? If
Yeah,
they-
then they're not mimicking it, right? Because it's just part of them, right? If it was Japanese people, they could be mimicking Americans or vice versa, right? They could have learned it from each other. But it seems like if people in New Guinea are showing those expressions and they understand those expressions, there's something about those expressions that's universal, right? So that's how he tested it rather than going to every culture in the world and seeing if they had them. He used a nice comparison group where it ruled out the possibility of learning them. Now, what I'm going to do after class is I'm going to put up an assignment where I want you to talk about that. I'm going to ask you, why did he use New Guinea? And I want you guys to write the answer. Okay? Move on to it, just so you get used to it, so you understand it, better before it all flies away, right? Okay. So here is my slides, maybe a little out of order. I don't know. Here is, and then we'll take a break in about when I get done with this, because I know we spent a lot of time doing the other stuff, but I thought that was useful. Maybe it wasn't, going over the exam a little. So emotions are thought to be functional. So like, particularly from like these theories, evolutionary or whatever. So what does fear do? Well, fear makes you feel bad, but what does it function to do? What is fear for, in a sense? Why do humans have fear?
Alert?
Alert? Yeah, it alerts us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an alert, right? Because what would happen if you didn't get that alert? If you didn't stay alert, what could happen to you?
Oh,
What?
anything.
Like get $1 million or something?
No, I guess that's not anything, right?
Yeah, well, that is something, but it's a positive thing, right? So fear
Right.
is sort of if something bad is going to happen, right? You should be afraid, right? So I heard somebody said one time that culture, I forget what culture they were talking about, my culture, I think they said, we have no fear. And I'm like, that's bullshit. I said, because if your culture had no fear, you wouldn't be here. But you cannot find a culture with no fear, or else they wouldn't have survived. It's like everybody's got some fear, right? It wouldn't be adaptive to have no fear, right? So yeah, so it allows us to avoid danger. So maybe if there's a culture where there are no high surfaces that you can fall off of, there's no water you can drown in, there are no large animals that could eat you, there are no aggressive other humans that can attack you, then maybe you don't need fear. But we've never seen a place like that in the world. So humans have fear. And again, the evolutionary argument is that if you have fear, you're able to survive. You don't get killed as easily. And when you're not dead, you can reproduce. So that's a trait that gets passed down. What does disgust do for us? And I already have it here, right? But the argument of disgust is it keeps people away from things that make them ill. So if you smell something nasty, you get that disgust expression. And the argument is that whatever it is could potentially make you ill if you ingest it or breathe it in, right? So it's seen as sort of protective. And you even look at the face under disgust. What are you doing? You're crinkling up your nose, you're closing your mouth, pulling away. You're kind of, putting your face in a situation that stuff can't get in. So that would be the function of disgust, to keep us from getting illness. Well, people know what morning sickness is, right? Well, that's to keep teratogens, things that can make you sick during particularly the first trimester of pregnancy, from affecting the fetus. Because you get grossed out, particularly about things that could serve as teratogens. That's why it's there. Right? It feels bad, but it serves an adaptive function. Only when it gets so bad that it really dehydrates and makes it dangerous for the infant, but in normal circumstances, it can be adapted. Okay, so let's talk about the development of these things. Somebody is leaving and coming. All right, let's see. Somebody left us and I don't know where they are. Let's see. Oh, no, I don't want to do this. Where'd that person go? Oh, admit. Who is this? And okay, let me shrink. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I want to get through the emotion a little bit. Okay. At birth, the emotions, and these don't line up perfectly with different words or whatever, but very similar to the basic emotions. At birth, you have interest, you have distress, but it's not like fear, it's general distress in the baby. It's non-focused like fear would be. Disgust, my baby showed disgust. Contentment, that's general, right? And that's basically from the beginning, that there are certain emotions that babies show, right? Contentment is one. Distress, interest, disgust. And during the first year, you'll see a few more added on that will sort of complete that palette of basic emotions. Between 2 and 7 months, now you're seeing anger, sadness, joy, surprise, and fear. Now, the joy you might see in social smiles, right? So the social smiles are coming at about between 6 and 10 weeks, right? And you've seen that in babies, right? Where they smile, their face lights up. And they get bigger between 3 and 6 months. So they're really starting to show their social smiles between like a month and a half and, a few months.
And those are all under Ekman's theory?
Yeah, they're all, well, they're under Ekman. Basically, Ekman and people like that do talk about the different discrete emotions, right?
Okay.
Like they have this and this, and they're all expressed in the first. This is just what you see, not necessarily consistent with. It's consistent with Ekman, but it's basically saying all humans have these basic emotions. When they develop, they become more developed over time. That's not really necessarily Ekman, but it's saying with development, they become more differentiated.
Okay.
Right. So I'm not going to ask you what theory that is. Just, at birth, they're,
At that
you
age,
see a couple of them, but when they get a little older, now they're showing all the basic emotions. Yeah. But you know what? There are other emotions that come, and people often say online, come about that all the emotions aren't there during the first year. There are other emotions that happen a little later during the second year and third year. And this is These are called secondary or complex emotions. Now, here are some of them. Embarrassment, shame, guilt, pride. Now, you don't really have these much in infants. Like during the first year, they don't tend to be embarrassed, right? That takes something to have embarrassment. You might have to be a little older to have that, or shame. Now, is there any similarity between these emotions? Embarrassment, shame, guilt, pride. Do you see anything that they have in common, these emotions?
Shame, guilt, and pride has self-evaluative, and embarrassment is self-conscious.
Okay, yeah, but they all have what? Self, right?
Ego.
Yeah, they have ego or self, right? Like in order to be embarrassed, you have to have a, sense of yourself, right? I mean, that's why it's embarrassing, right? You're embarrassed for yourself. And they've done in social psychology years ago, they did things like they would have people in rooms and they would have mirrors, and the people were much less likely to do certain things if there were mirrors up there. And then they put masks on people, and they were willing to do way more negative things with the masks on, right? Because it's like people couldn't see them, right? So it was almost like, yeah, their self wasn't as relevant to the situation. So in order to have these kind of emotions, it's been argued that you need to have a sense of yourself. Now, how do they assess whether children sort of have a sense of themselves? One way is to look to see if they recognize themselves, self-recognition. Now, it's almost like a physical sense of self, but does anybody know how they do that? If you can tell that a child recognizes himself, has anybody seen tasks that measure that? Well, I just happened to have a little video clip here, and hopefully everything works and I can remember to show it.
Does this fall under egocentrism?
No. Oh, when they're younger than that, they don't have some. No, not really. I mean, this more egocentrism is when you're aware of yourself but not others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like as an infant, you don't really have a concept of yourself. So it isn't that they have themselves and not other, they don't really have a concept of themselves, right? Right. But let's just look at this and then we'll take a little break after it because it's even though we have some time, we've been going a while, even though a lot of it was spent going over stuff. So let's see if I can't show this. Okay, let me stop sharing this. Make sure I have a good copy of this link, unless it's linkable. No, it isn't. It isn't hyperlinked, so I will copy it and I will move this somewhere. And I will move this somewhere, and then I will do this, and I will go. Oh, I think I have it in here. Sorry, guys. Marks. Here it is. Okay. Now I'll move this out of here. I'll move that out of here, and I will try to get sound to. Oh, it's not being shared now. So I'm sharing something, but not this, I don't think. Okay, sorry, guys. Where to go? Where to go? Okay, I will not minimize it. I did something illegal. Okay. I'm going to shrink this. I just had that open. Is this it? No, that's not it. I'm going to do it. Okay, sorry. I got to get the video back. There it is. Now, got to shrink that. I'm going to move that Sorry. It is, I'm gonna go to Zoom again, move this and that and that and that and come on, that. I'm not sure this is a, well, no, this isn't it. It went forward. Here it is.
Who's that in the mirror? This is known as a mirror self-recognition test, which may offer clues about the development of self-awareness. Without alerting the child, a mark is placed on its forehead. It's a baby. It's a baby. Usually, a baby younger than about 18 months doesn't make the connection between itself and the person in the mirror. The child may even look behind the mirror for the stranger it sees. Meow. By about 18 months, there's a change in the child's awareness. Now it notices the red dot and the link between itself and the image in the mirror. Not red. Over the next few years, children go on to fulfill their human birthright, constructing an increasingly sophisticated sense of self. They will have a rich and complex life of the mind, and a sense of being the central characters in their own dramas.
Okay. So,
They don't believe how toxic this is.
well,
If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear this.
I
We never post stuff like this, but I had to share.
I don't agree. I use that kind of a cutting board. Sorry. I feel strongly about using infected cutting boards, and that's just how I am. All right, so, let's go back. Sorry, guys. Where are you? Let me share again. Okay, so yeah, so let me stretch this if it lets me. Oh, sorry. Ah. Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah, what they found is that a lot of these, sorry, these secondary emotions, right? They seem to depend on a sense of self. And kids who have, can recognize themselves in the mirror are more likely to have these emotions. It's not letting me scroll down on it. So some of these things like embarrassment, shame, guilt, pride, they don't come out in the first year. And it's thought that the reason is they can't connect it with themselves. And once they have more of a self-concept, then they can be embarrassed, because embarrassment is about the self, right? You're not embarrassed, it's sometimes you're embarrassed for other people, but or shame, right? That's evaluating yourself negatively. You have shame, right? Or you did something wrong, but it's you did it. You have to realize you did it to be guilty about it. Or pride, right? You don't have pride when something goes your way, right? Like somebody praises you for doing something really good, but you didn't really do it, right? Oh, you did great on this, but you cheated, or it wasn't really you who did it. You don't really feel pride about that, right? It has to be relevant to you to feel the pride, right? So that's, and that seems to be related to, at least come after young children start having that sense of self, which starts at, kind of the earliest, about 18 months, maybe a little earlier, but certainly in the second and third years, they have that. They also, children's often don't have, and you've heard this, we'll talk about it later. We don't remember things or episodes in our lives from before we're about 3 years old. Sometimes 2 or whatever, and often it's not until about 4. So in those early years, the argument's been we don't really have a sense of self, so we don't really have a place to store them, like meaningfully as part of ourselves. So we don't have what's called episodic memory, meaning we don't remember episodes in our lives. We may know certain things, but we may know where we were born because we were told that, or what we did as a little girl or boy because we were told by our parents. And sometimes we think that's what we remembered. And that's hard because how do you know it's really a memory? Or because people get that mixed up all the time. I remember being there, and sometimes it's because their parents told them. Right. So it's having those, being able to mentally time travel and look back and remember being in the situation that you often doesn't, or almost always doesn't happen before a certain age. And it's not because it's a number of years since then. Because they'll go, if somebody's older, they'll go, well, that's because it was a lot of years ago. But you can ask a 10-year-old what they did when they were 2, and they may tell you, but they can't really remember being in that situation. It isn't because you asked a 50-year-old versus, a 10-year-old. It's that they weren't encoded the same way. They weren't encoded into the self, right? Because maybe they didn't really have a coherent sense of self yet. So the self is relevant, and it certainly is in these kind of emotions. Then we have we'll finish with this and then we'll take a break and go on. How can we tell if a baby is need some water, is displaying a certain emotion, like on their face? Somebody says, well, babies at this age seem to show disgust. At this age, they can show joy or happiness. Kids by this age can, be surprised. How do you know that's what it is? As let's say, a researcher, how would you know? How could you be sure you're not being biased? Would you ask people, do you think your baby shows, I don't know, sadness? Right? How could you as a researcher be sure that it's sadness? Does that make any sense? That you're seeing?
Maybe you do an experiment.
Well, you could do what you would want to do is you would have to do at least an observation, but you'd have to constrain it in some way. So you'd have to, like, let's say you saw a picture of a baby, right? Or a little video of a baby showing a certain expression. Let's say it was disgust. And then you saw a video and somebody is taking some food or whatever and putting it on the baby's lips or showing it to them, and the baby does that. Then anybody probably would say that's disgust, because you'd see the baby's reaction to the food. A good idea would be you take the food away. You don't show the baby the food, you just show the baby's face. Right? And see if they can identify that facial expression as disgust versus something else. Because the second you put the elicitor there, then you've given it away. Then people are going to go, of course it's disgust, because they know it's disgust because of the reaction. So you want to know whether the babies are actually showing the facial expression of disgust, right? What it's supposed to look like. And then you would ask people, can you identify what expression that baby's showing? And they might say disgust. But if you were to put food in front of the baby and they did that, then you're stacking the deck, because they're all going to say disgust, right? Does that make sense? So you basically want to control for any, cues you're giving, clues you're giving. So they're just basing what they think on what they saw. And you'd also want other people to say that. So one person says it's discussed, you want agreement from other people, right? So you'd have a bunch of people sit there and look at babies' faces and they would identify, let's say, an expression as disgust. And if all the people in your lab or whatever are calling it disgust, it's probably disgust. But you wouldn't want to put a clue in there, right? And you'd want agreement. You'd want them all to be able to agree that that's what it is. So yeah, you want inter-rater agreement. Okay, so that was fun. So why don't we take about 10 minutes and then we'll come back and talk about understanding emotions, and we'll, hopefully be able to start talking about temperament tonight. I know we're a little behind with the exam. I just thought it might be useful to walk through it. Okay, so 10 minutes and be back in 10 minutes. See you then. And let me
Professor, you're on mute if you're speaking. Not sure.
Okay. 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 We're back. We'll be done soon, but we're back now. Okay. All right. So that's sort of just emotions and what they look like and all that good stuff in their development. Now we're going to talk about understanding others' emotions. Now, I'm putting up a couple of things here that are consistent with understanding others' emotions. Things that infants do and children do. So newborns will cry in response to hearing another baby's cry, and they've noticed this over the years, and like where there are babies around, it sort of triggers other babies to respond. So they're certainly sensitive to the emotions of others, even if they're not in a, even understanding them. It's sort of a very sort of infantile level of empathy that they have an emotional response to emotions in others. Now, newborns between birth and 5 weeks of age prefer face-like to non-face-like stimuli. So they like faces, they like human faces. So that doesn't mean they understand emotions at, that young age, at least not completely, but it means they're sensitive to them, to faces, and how do you tell emotion from faces? So it would be sort of kind of required to be good at understanding emotions to be sensitive to the face. So this is, oh, sorry, that bunch of stuff here. Okay. So these are newborns between birth and 5. And let me show you how they do this research or how they've done it. I thought I had it on this slide. I'm going to go beyond this and I'll come back. It's on the next set of slides. Here they are. So here's some classic work done by Morton and Johnson. And what they did was they showed infants this is where they get like the newborns and stuff. They show them faces that look like this. Now they don't really, they look like paddles in a sense, but these were the stimuli. They were face-like stimuli. They weren't faces. And in one instance, it was an actual kind of like a face, right? The eyes, nose, and mouth are in the right position. In another condition, they're scrambled, right? So all the elements are there, but they're not in the canonical or standard way, right? Like the mouth is, the eyes are at the top and bottom, the nose is in the middle, but everything is sort of scrambled around. And then in the last, it's blank. It's just nothing in the middle. And they were interested in seeing which one the infants looked at more. Because if they looked at it more, that was a sign of, that they were more attracted to it, they preferred it. And they found that the infants paid more attention to the the standard face-like stimulus. Now, the reason these other faces are relevant is if it was just that it's sort of a complex configuration, a lot of items and they're symmetrical, they should look just as long as at the scrambled face, right? If they're just interested in the shape of the face here, they would look just as long at the blank face as the other ones, but they didn't. They looked a lot longer at the face that had the standard features. So it just shows that even during, and we'll go back, even during between birth and 5 weeks of age, babies prefer that kind of a thing. They have a special focus on the human face. 2-day-old infants attend to infant-directed speech. Anybody ever hear that term, infant-directed speech? Sometimes they call it motherese, and then they call it parentese, because, how do mothers or parents or adults talk to babies when they talk to babies? You don't have to do it, because then you'll
With a high pitched voice.
you'll be recorded. Yes, with a high-pitched voice, right? And like a sing-songy, right? It's not just high, it goes up and down, yeah. And it seems to be really good at getting kids' attention. And there's a researcher named Anne Fernald who's done a lot of work on this, and she's done things like have somebody who, let's say it's a Japanese baby who's used to hearing Japanese from the mother, and then they speak to the baby in German, but they do motherese, they do infant-directed speech. The baby will pay a lot more attention to the German in infant-directed speech than their own language. Right? So it's more about the music than the words, in a sense. They're following the sing-songiness of it. They're really, and the way they tell that is they put a pacifier in the baby's mouth and they attach it. It's like they attach it sort of electronically to a meter. And if the baby sucks a lot, it'll play that sound. It'll play the infant-directed speech more. And if they don't suck as often, it'll dissipate. And this is how they can tell the baby wants, because the baby can't say, I want to hear it. So it's the baby is basically selecting what they're hearing based on their sucking rate. And they show that the baby, this is how they tell whether babies can hear in the womb as well. Because they'll have something the baby heard in the womb and they'll have them suck to hear more of it. Because babies can't tell you. And indeed, they really like the infant-directed speech, even if it's in a different language than their language. They'd rather hear that than the language they're used to hearing, as long as it's up and down and high pitch. And that the reason you put that in emotion, it's really the emotional aspect of the words rather than just the meaning of the words, the semantics. 2.5 to 3 months, they respond differently to happy, sad, and angry facial expressions of the mother. So they react differently if the mother's happy or sad or angry, which doesn't mean they understand it, but they're sensitive to emotional cues. Now, this is one you may have heard of if you took, I don't know how many people took child psych, but if you did, I'm sure you heard about this. 7 to 10-month-olds, they begin doing something called social referencing. And what social referencing is if the classic demonstration of this is something called a visual cliff. I don't know if anyone's heard of a visual cliff. I don't think I have one here. No, I don't have video of it. But basically what it is there's like a piece of plexiglass. So the baby is on one side of it, and let's say the mom is on the other side of it, and the baby can crawl over what looks like a drop. Right? Like if they look down, it looks like they can drop, but they can't because it's solid, but they can see through it. And what they do is they try to see if the baby will cross, right? The baby's afraid. Will the baby cross over to the mom? And depending on the mom's expression, if the mom looks concerned, the baby's not going to cross or less likely to cross. If the mom has a happy expression and looks calm, the baby will cross. So the baby will use the emotions of the caregiver to decide what to do. And it's called social referencing because you're referencing someone else to tell you what to do. And that something else is their emotions. So the babies, toward the end of the second half of the first year are using a caregiver or an adult's emotions to figure out how to behave. So it's called social referencing. I think that's, let's see if there's another one. No, I knew there was some. I'll put you guys' faces up top. There's one study. Do I have the authors here? I know them, but let's see, I don't think I list it. It's not that important. Okay. By a year and a half, 18 months, seems like babies, in this case toddlers, can use others' emotional expressions to figure out what that person likes, what they prefer. Now, what the example here is, they can tell sort of desires or preferences based on the emotion of the other person. So there's a classic study which actually hasn't been replicated effectively. Everybody who does it seems to find what these researchers found about 6 months after they found them. So maybe they had an atypical sample, or at least a few months. What they do is there's a researcher, an experimenter, or a research assistant, and they sit with the baby and they have 2 bowls. One bowl is, no, sorry, I messed it up. I always forget. They have broccoli and animal crackers. All right, broccoli and animal crackers. Well, first question is, which do you think the kids, the toddlers, prefer, the broccoli or the animal crackers?
Animal crackers.
I might ask you why. Why do you think they like the animal crackers better?
I don't think there's an answer to that.
There is.
Well, I think that the broccoli is fuzzy.
Okay. If you want to live till tomorrow and you're starving, would you eat a piece of broccoli or would you eat crackers?
Well, they're 18 months old. Did you say 18
They
months?
don't have to understand that. They have to have a preference. Most
Mm.
of what we do, we don't understand. It's this much of what you do, you really know why you're doing it. If you want to live till tomorrow, would you have to eat broccoli or would you eat some crackers?
The broccoli.
If you want to live till you're 90, you'd eat the broccoli. If you want to live till tomorrow, you'd eat the crackers. Broccoli doesn't have anything that'll get you through the day in terms of glucose, in terms of necessary sugars and calories and carbohydrates. It's, it's very good long term, but it's not what something more sweet and high carby would do, right? Humans have plenty of foliage they can eat. They have to have a mechanism that can find sweet things and high carb things. The problem is, in a world now where everything is sweet and high carb, you put that tendency in there and people are not healthy. But all babies will desire the sweet stuff over the stuff that's good for you. You have to teach kids to like broccoli. You don't have to teach them to like juice or crackers or anything like that. You just don't. It's biologically prepared. So, okay, so 18-month-olds. So what they do is they take, so all the kids in this case like the crackers more than the broccoli, right? I'm not trying to, with the broccoli industry, it's really good for you. So what they do is there's somebody there, and what the person says is they show their preference for one or the other, broccoli or crackers. So in one instance, the person, the experimenter, whatever, picks up the broccoli and goes, broccoli, like yummy broccoli. In another case, they go, broccoli, ick. Sometimes they say crackers, crackers. Others, they're like, ick, crackers. So they're showing like a facial expression. They don't like it. The crackers. Now, all the kids like the crackers more than the broccoli. But the interesting question here is when the person testing them, so you have broccoli in one little bowl and crackers in another bowl, equidistant from each other. And the tester puts his hand, I say him, his, because I knew a guy who did it and he was a him, puts their hand out and says, "Can I have some?" Then they wait for the child to give, whatever they think they should give them, right? So if let's say the kid likes crackers, which they did, but you say crackers, and I'm doing like a German accent, guy's German, and he goes, broccoli, crackers, and I heard that so much from this cat, so I say it. But he puts it out and goes, "Can I have some?" Now, Alison Gopnik and Betty Repicoli, the people who did this, said that by 18 months, kids start giving them, let's say, broccoli, even though the kids didn't like broccoli, because they could tell the other person based on their expressions liked the broccoli and went, "Ick, crackers," right? So they could separate them from what they liked and use the emotions of the other person to figure out what to give them. Now, what other researchers have found is that it's often not quite 18 months, even though they say it in your book. It's more approaching 2 years that they can do that. Maybe they had an atypical sample, but in general, kids get better at being able to, figure out what somebody else's preferences are, not just their own. And they can use the person's expressions to figure that out, right? To know what that is. So that's about 18 months or 2 years. Now, if we move on, and I will move these, between 3 and 5, they get better at labeling others' emotions, being able to, you start with happy and sad, and they can move on to other emotions. Between 5 and 10 years of age, they understand that people can hold two different emotions to the same situation. So they can be happy and excited, and those are compatible emotions. But then as they get a little older, during this period, they can understand that people may have different responses to the same situation. They might be excited but nervous, and be happy but, a little, again, nervous about it. They can have mixed feelings. So there's one example, and the researcher here is somebody by the name of Judy Dunn. And there's a scenario they give kids. They say, a ball went out in the street, right? And you go to get, and your mom says you can't go in the street, right? It's bad to go in the street, but you went in the street and you got your ball. They seem to understand that they're happy they got their ball, but they're sad that they broke a rule. They feel bad they broke a rule, but they're happy they got the ball. So it's these, these mixed feelings in a sense they might have. And she has other ones that she's done. Where are we? Is it here? Oh, why is it going completely crazy? Oh, no. There's one broken. Okay. There was another one about something like, yeah, you got, another one she had was like your puppy ran away or whatever, you lost your puppy. And in looking for your puppy, you found a kitten. They like that they found a kitten, but they feel bad they lost the puppy. So they can have two different emotions in the same sort of situation. This is interesting, and now I'm going to get conceptual. This is interesting from one perspective. Can anybody remember, and now I'm going back to Piaget, can anybody remember what kids are able to do when they're in concrete operations, when they're entering concrete operations?
Logic.
Okay, logic. But remember centered thinking or centration?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, what was the definition of centration? Anybody? What was that?
Was it that they could see I forgot.
Well, centration or centered thinking is focusing on one dimension or aspect at the exclusion of other things. As children, let's say the conservation task, right? In the conservation task, what are they looking at first? They're going, this has more water. Why? It goes up higher. They're just looking at the height. And then they get a little older and they can take into account the height and the width. See that? So if it's a wide thing, even if it doesn't go up as high, they can realize it has the same amount. They get better at looking at like two aspects of something. Well, what are they doing here? They're looking at two different aspects of a situation, emotional aspects. You can have this emotion and that to the same situation. The only reason I bring this up is some of the stuff they do emotionally, their understanding is probably not specific to emotions. It's part of a more general cognitive achievement, right? It's more domain general. They can see different aspects of things, whether you're talking about physical objects or emotions or things like that. So, and then from an information processing perspective, we might say the reason they can do that is they don't get stuck on one emotional reaction to something, but they can, consider other things as well. They're more flexible. So yeah, I just, what it's worth, it's the difference between a domain general and domain specific explanation for children understanding mixed emotions. Okay, in infancy, now what is this? I'm moving this if it goes because it's in the way, regulating emotions. In infancy, as we know, in infancy, one thing infants will do when they're very young, let's say something's disturbing to them, they'll look away. That's a very physical way of regulating your emotions. As kids get older, they develop more effective strategies. They get better at like thinking about something else if something bothers them, right? So it's not just physically avoiding it, but putting your mind on something else. It's a more cognitive strategy. They may distract themselves by, thinking of a pleasant experience. And regulating emotions is important, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we get into display rules. So what's a display rule? Here are display rules. These are culturally defined rules about when you can express emotion and what kind of emotions you can express, right? Which is acceptable to show and which are not acceptable to show. And in what circumstances. So at a funeral, you probably shouldn't be like laughing, right? We just, tend to have certain rules when it's appropriate to do something, when it's not appropriate. And we call that those are called display rules. So remember Ekman showed that kids, people in general are, the basic emotions are universal. Everybody in the world pretty much, or every culture have certain emotions. But cultures differ in terms of, what emotions are okay to display, right? So they have them, but they may not express them the same way. And that seems to be more cultural than biological. So here's another Ekman study. So if you look at this and understand it, this will be part of the question you're going to do by tomorrow. Here they did look at people in Japan. Remember I said, why wouldn't they look at Japan for figuring out if everybody has the same emotions? Here they looked at students again from UC Berkeley and from the University of Tokyo, so Japanese. They showed them films of body mutilation, just what everyone wants to see. It's actually surgery. It wasn't morbid. It was just, they showed them pictures of surgeries, which can be pretty gross, and they had them in one condition. They had these were college students. They had them watching the surgeries on a video with someone else in the room. And in the other instance, they watched it alone. And who were the people in the room? Who was the other person in the room? The person who's the experimenter, a professor or researcher wearing a white lab coat. So in one case, they have somebody wearing a white lab coat while they're watching the surgeries. And in the other case, they're alone watching the surgeries, right? So they looked at the difference in what the American kids did and the Japanese kids did. And what do you think the difference is? You can read it, and I put it up, or I can ask you. What happened to the American kids and the Japanese kids when they watched the surgeries? What emotions did they show?
I would get
oh.
afraid. They would be afraid to watch somebody get cut into.
Yeah, they had it was sort of a negative emotion, like their faces. They showed it was a little bit of like fear, but also disgust. They were like, it was not a positive thing to watch, right? Both the Japanese and American kids had very similar expressions to that. So they were showing when they were alone, they were showing that they were reacting to it. What happened when the American kids had somebody, an authority figure, believe me, profs are not authority figures, but with a white lab coat? What did the American kids do when they saw this surgery? Did their emotions change, or did they still show the negative emotion?
They didn't show it.
They did show it, Cindy.
Oh, wait.
Cindy.
Sorry. They did
Yeah, they did show it. The Japanese kids didn't. The Japanese kids, when somebody else was there, they masked it, right? Because there seems to be something in Japanese culture that you're not supposed to display your emotions as much, particularly negative emotions. So in American culture, you're allowed to express your emotions. And of course, there are subcultures, right? Because in American culture, there are some cultures that are much more guarded with that, some that are less. But in general, American culture shows it more than Japanese culture, right? It's kind of known for that. So, but he was interested because he was saying, they all have the same emotions. So he wanted to see. He said, well, maybe because there was a reputation. This is, in the early 70s, there had already been a reputation that Japanese people didn't show their emotions as much. So he said, well, maybe they don't show their emotions because they don't feel them as much. Or maybe there's something about their socialization why they don't show them. And what ends up happening? It was more the socialization. It was that they have rules for when it's okay to show emotions. So these are referred to as display rules. There are cultural differences in display rules. So there's universal emotions and emotional reactions, but then you cover them up. Certain cultures are asked to cover them up more or express them more. Right? So that's the second part of it, of his research that shows that. Okay. When we talk about display rules or expression of emotions and when you mask them, kids get better at masking their emotions from preschool through, childhood through middle childhood. They get better at sort of, if they feel a certain way, masking. Girls are particularly good at this, better than boys. So they might be disappointed, but they might smile. Even though they're disappointed, they get better at doing that because it's more socially acceptable to smile, right? It sort of is like a social lubricant to do that. And girls seem to be at least more sensitive or able to do that than boys. Now, some differences, they express positive emotion. They also express positive emotion more than boys. But they also express negative emotions like anxiety and sadness more than boys. So, they control their emotions better than boys. But in general, they express most emotions more than boys. Even though they control them, they also express certain ones more. Now, what happened to this? Okay, here, let me move these faces out of here. Okay, now, if you look at this in terms of, and this isn't just display rules, but it's just emotional expression differences. Women tend to express emotion, you may not be surprised at this, more than men do in general, both positive and negative. They're more likely to share their emotions than men are, right? However, the exception with men is men express anger and aggression more than women do, right? So even though women express most emotions more than men, there are a few emotions that they express more, like anger. Now, if you look at this developmentally, I'm going to try to get rid of these. As toddlers, boys show more frustration than girls when they're toddlers. So you could see that as aggression, but it's like a negative emotion. And this goes right into middle childhood. But it doesn't happen in infancy, which is interesting. So it's not like, they're just starting out different in that way. So there might be some socialization going on there for why you don't see a difference in infancy, but you see it later on. And it could still be like a biological thing that's like a timetable. But it doesn't seem to, in several studies, it doesn't seem to happen in infancy, but it comes out in toddlerhood, which is, after the first year, first couple of years. And the first year is infancy, and between about 2 or 3, that's toddlerhood, 2-year-olds and whatnot, or 1-year-old to 2-year-olds. And then early childhood. So it's extending to middle childhood. And I'm going to move this there. More recently, and I'd say more recently, this isn't yesterday, but it's way newer than, let's say, Eleanor Maccabee's study, which is really important, but it's from years ago, found that in adolescents, and this has been found, I think it's based on 11 studies they looked at. So it's not a huge number of studies, but they found that counterintuitively in adolescence, girls were showing more externalizing emotions. What are externalizing? Anger. Things like anger versus things like sadness and anxiety. Now that doesn't last forever, but the whole question is, why would they be, doing that more? And is that a more recent thing that's happening? So whenever you talk about this kind of stuff, there's so many different studies, and one says this, one says that. It's very hard to keep track of. One thing that's really important to know, which we don't, is cultural differences. An unfortunate thing that people are often aware of is there's an underrepresentation of studies with people, let's say in America, with people from other cultures other than the dominant culture, right? So you don't, you might start making statements like this is what happens and that happens, but there may be different cultures in America where it's slightly different. And we, at this point, don't have enough data to really know that. Like some evidence seems to suggest that sex differences that we see in these kind of things with expression may not obtain as much in particularly in Black samples or whatever, than in white samples. Hard to know why, or if that's really a strong effect. You just need so much more research to be able to know that. That's why, of course, you need representation research, because you want to get a picture of how people are, how kids develop, not how, upper middle class white kids develop. So let's move down the line. Emotional competence. Let me move the faces again, if they'll go away. So what does it predict? Emotional competence. Showing positive emotions more is related to likability by teachers and peers. So, people like positive people. And if people are downers, people don't often like them unless you're like a goth person or something. Maybe they like it. But most people, they'd rather be around positive, even if they're not positive, they'd like to be around people, who are positive. The ability to understand others' emotions, and girls are better at understanding others' emotions, general, not absolutely, linked to social competence. So teacher ratings and making friends, if you understand others' emotions better, people who understand people's emotions better are better at making friends. Well, that makes sense, right? If you can understand someone, so you're not going to offend them as easily, you're not going to, if you know they're sad, you might try to help them out. So you have the expression of emotion, the understanding of emotion, predicting things. And this one's really important, emotion regulation or dysregulation. Kids who have trouble regulating their emotions, particularly anger, that's related to peer rejection. So kids who are very angry, peers don't want anything to do with them, right? And you know this, you've probably seen this. Kids who are aggressive, kids sort of reject them. They don't want to be around aggressive kids. And they don't want to be around angry kids. So anger and the inability to control the anger, that's the important part. That often gets kids excluded. So that's an important one. When we talk about attachment, different attachment styles and stuff, there are certain kids who have a certain type of attachment that really is related to negative emotions and emotion regulation, and it's a predictor of negative things because of that. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Oh, it's 8:45. I'm sorry. We're 5 over. Okay. Sorry, I said we're getting near the end. We're beyond the end. So I apologize. You could have screamed at me. You could have dysregulated yourself. Okay. So what we're going to do tomorrow night, we're going to talk about temperament. Does that make sense? We'll talk about that and we'll finish it. We'll finish temperament and move on. You know what I think I'm going to do tomorrow? I don't know. All kinds of stuff. I'll probably shower. I haven't done it in 3 weeks, and they tell me that's a good way to make friends. It's as good as emotion regulation in making friends, or the opposite, losing friends. I think I'm going to give a quiz tomorrow. No, I'm not. We're not doing a. Oh yeah, we're going to do a quiz on a transition topic. I'm going to give a quiz tomorrow where everybody gets a 10.
Transition.
What is it? Yeah, we're going to transition because we're going to be transitioning later. After temperament, we're going to transition to attachment. So what I think I'm going to do is I'll give I'm touching things and things are happening and I don't mean to. What I'm going to do is give a quiz where, it's like a practice quiz.
On what?
On emotional development and temperament and attachment, the next chapter.
That's chapter 5, correct?
That's chapter 5, yes. So the notes in chapter 5, being we're not done with this yet, so I don't feel as comfortable giving it to count. And also, doing a little better on quizzes can't hurt anybody, right? So, everybody's still in the game. Everybody's still in the running here. So, we'll get through all this.
Chapter 5 and
Yeah, chapter 4, well, notes from this tonight and chapter 5 from the textbook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up an assignment. I didn't release it yet. and what the assignment is doing. So check for it and then answer like before and, send them in. As long as you get it done by class tomorrow, it's fine. And what I want you to do is, it's going to be questions about the Ekman studies. I'm going to ask you why he used the group for seeing if emotions are universal, right? He used the New Guinea people. Then why did he use students in Japan as his comparison group when he was looking at display rules? See that? And the reason, I can tell you the reason he looked at people in Japan. Japan was known to hide their emotions. They were known to do that, right? Like people, not to hide them, but they were known as being non-emotional. They weren't as emotional. He wanted to know, is it because there's differences in the amount of emotion they have, or is it based on display rules? And he found out that it was display rules because when they were alone and they didn't have to self-present, they showed the same emotions as the Americans. Right? But he had to find a place that was, where people weren't as emotionally expressive in order to do it. And he knew Japan was a place. New Guinea was because they had no interaction with anybody else. So they couldn't have learned them from others outside their community. So if they shared the same emotions, it was because it was something about them being human that they had those emotions. All right? So, yeah, that's up there. You can answer that. And if you have trouble remembering, this is taped. You can listen to it again and use that for your questions. Okay, sorry, guys. So what I'll do is I'll put the recording up. It'll go up right after class. Okay? Everyone good? We're okay. All right, good seeing everyone. I know it's late.
Good night.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
night, sir.
Bye.
The assignment's going to be due tonight or tomorrow
No,
night?
no, tomorrow night. Don't worry. I don't need to. Yes, it'll be due by class tomorrow. So you can do it anytime before that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye. And what is good?